The Bear is back with season 2, and before I get into this, just wow, what a season of the show it was. From 12-minute one-take scenes, an hour-long special which went back in time, and even moments that were extremely emotional to witness, this season had it all. Focusing around Carmen's vision of opening a high-quality restaurant, this season saw all of the ups and downs that came along with it, whilst each and every character battled with the feeling of self-purpose and the contribution that they brought. And that also meant that the lack of purpose inside of the individuals was something which was felt too. So with that, let's recap, break down, and explain all that there was to take away from Season 2. So let's get into it. Here is The Bear Season 2 ending explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. With there being so many main characters involved in this overarching plot for the second season, I'm going to break the video down by the main characters. Let's start with Carmen. Carmen is the main focus in the show, and we saw how he was battling with the stress of having to overcome all of the red tape that was needed in order to open up a restaurant, and the uphill battle that was there with everything that kept going wrong, but also whilst trying to balance being in a relationship with old-time spark Claire. We saw that it was clear from the off that he was reluctant to let anybody inside of his heart and have anything else outside of the restaurant, as was seen when he deliberately gave her the wrong number when Sydney went to his apartment and it was almost like a blank canvas with nothing in it, and how he didn't know whether or not to call Claire his girlfriend. We even saw that he was growing slightly more distant from the development of the restaurant and was leaving a lot of the work to Sydney, which was something that was surprising for the character as he'd always been so focused on it. Every second counts was a main saying in this season, and it was relevant for every single character, such as Marcus, Richie, but most importantly, Carmen. This was due to him needing to open the restaurant by a certain date in order to start paying back the loan. Instead of a 6-month time frame, he gave everybody a 3-month time frame, which he did manage to successfully do. However, when it came to the opening night, he ended up getting locked in the walk-in refrigerator, something which was rather symbolic of the distractions that he had in his mind, and something which was present from the moment that the season opened. The handle needed to be repaired, but he kept forgetting to get it sorted, and even when he was going to phone the repair person at the end, the call with Claire distracted him before being pulled away to something else. So it really did act as the center point and main repercussion of the way that he'd been acting and being distracted. However, with Claire going back into the kitchen at the end, she overheard everything that he said when he thought that he was speaking with Tina. He mentioned how he felt as though he didn't deserve to be on the receiving end of anything good in his life, and how he didn't deserve to also give that to somebody else. He also mentioned that he felt as though he worked better before when he didn't have any distractions. With Claire hearing this, it ultimately meant that it finished off with Claire leaving him, and him having a large argument with Richie where he vocalized that he thought that he was a leech in the family. Carmen being locked in there was the first time that he'd truly been alone with his thoughts in weeks, and you could tell that it was due to the thoughts that he was having. Intrusive, dark thoughts and memories that were coming back to him. Carmen thought that he was a mess up, and he kept telling himself that he'd failed whilst being locked in there. All of the negativity that was in his life was flashing before him and leading him to think that way. His family, the previous restaurant, his old boss, and many other things. He was saying that he wasn't good enough, almost like how we saw Donna acting in episode 6 of the show when she said that nobody would miss her. Despite pulling off something extremely impressive, there were clear parallels that were present between the both of them, and it showed that they share similarities more than what we originally thought. With him being rescued at the end and it being a successful night, he may have the restaurant for the time being, but he's most likely no longer got Claire, and with the bookings quieting down after the first couple of weeks, it's not going to get any easier for him moving forward. Sydney. Sydney shared the main focus with Carmen in this season. We saw that she had a higher role in the restaurant and she was a partner with Carmen. However, her biggest battle in this season was the fact that she was almost single-handedly doing it for the most part. She was working on the menu, visiting other restaurants, hiring people, sourcing the ingredients, and also the cutlery and crockery. There were even points where she was being left out of important decisions. The sense of loneliness was present and the doubts were forever in her mind over whether or not it was the right thing that she should have done, especially with her hearing about other restaurants closing down and how it wasn't the best type of working relationship that she was in. However, despite all of the doubts, she came through in the end and delivered a successful night, and there was quite a nice scene that occurred just before the final episode, where both Sydney and Carmen were under the table and they expressed to each other how they couldn't do it without one another and that they both made each other better. However, I would say that based on the opening night, Sydney was the person who delivered it all, and if anything, it showed that Carmen wasn't necessarily needed as much, which I think that smile at the end signified. Everybody chimed in at the end, and like the basketball coach said in an interview, it's better to do it as a team, but he wanted to be the leader of a team, and that's exactly what Sydney was. As she even mentioned as well, the best offense is to be able to pivot, and she did exactly that on the opening night. Sydney is proud of how far she came, but like Carmen, there's a long uphill battle to go before any success will be made. I imagine the next season might focus on the restaurant fishing for that star. Richie. Richie's story was focused around finding purpose and coming to the realization that it was never too late to change or find that purpose in your life. We saw this transformation happen in episode 7 of the show, where he went and worked in the best restaurants in the country, polishing forks. What started as somebody who would be snoozing the alarm and getting up as it went off, turned into somebody getting up before the alarm and being ready to tackle the day. He found purpose when working at the restaurant, seeing how the elite worked and thinking of ways that he'd be able to bring that into the bear. Watching him go from being an over-the-top individual who was acting loud and almost shouting to give that authoritative figure to give off the illusion that he had purpose, he transformed into a more quiet, tranquil, well-dressed and elegant individual who found purpose in serving others. Like what was said in the restaurant, there's a reason hospital and hospitality share the same word, because they serve individuals, and that episode was a real changing point for him. Plus, when he spoke to Olivia Colman's character who owned the restaurant that he was working at, it allowed him to realize that it was never too late, and that he came to the conclusion that every second counted. Watching his transformation was great to see, and he turned into a character that you truly rooted for. You could see the emptiness that was once present before, but by the end, he was a transformed individual. With him having his argument with Carmen, I think he's going to be able to move on from it by the time the next season comes around, especially considering that he was saying to him that he loved him. Marcus. Marcus was a character that actually opened the show and almost became the very thing that Carmen was, an individual who no longer had time for anything else and became hyper-focused on one thing. We saw him in Copenhagen learning under one of the best, and he came back as a heavily inspired person who was able to create 3 new desserts that were going to be used on the menu in the bear. With the desserts proving to be a hit, we saw that right at the end of the episode, his phone, now underneath one of his belongings, had several missed calls and text messages from the nurse. His mother was in hospital and didn't have that long left to live. Prior to him going away, we saw that he was always phoning her, speaking with her, and making an effort to see her. But after his return, we rarely saw him do that, so it showed that the love of being a chef started to take more of a focus as he started to resemble that obsessive tunnel vision that Carmen had. However, the sign that he received at the end, which said every second counts, is going to hit home even harder, as I imagine his mother is most probably no longer around, or she could have slipped into an even more critical condition, thus potentially leading to some regrets. Purpose was definitely the main focus in this season, and the fact that you have to make the most of the time that you have. We saw Tina go on to find purpose with refined skills after being promoted to Seuss. Ebra as an individual who tried to battle change and was mourning the sandwich shop, and Mikey ultimately ended up giving in and returning to the restaurant because he realized that it was part of him and he lacked purpose without it. Plus, with Natalie, she found her purpose whilst working with her brother and doing what she felt she did best, which was working there. She cares about people, as we saw when she was constantly asking her mother if she was okay. Working in the restaurant was definitely the best thing for her. Overall review. I thought this season was phenomenal to witness. There were moments that really did make me feel emotional when watching it, and I think when a show like this does that, you know it's onto something. It's similar in Ted Lasso to the way that it really makes you invest in these characters and feel what they're feeling. I thought episode 6 of the show, where we saw Christmas Day, was executed so perfectly. I felt so uncomfortable watching the scene in the kitchen due to the chaotic nature of it. The timers, the multiple voices, the camera moving extremely quickly, even the dirty glass. Everything about the way that scene was structured was so uncomfortable to watch. Plus, they also nailed the chaotic nature of Christmas in a lot of people's households, despite it maybe not being as crazy as a car driving through the wall. The scene where Lee was telling Mikey that he was nothing was something that was so powerful to witness as well. as you could really see that it sunk into Mikey's mind and he believed it. Episode 6 was a definite standout for me. I also really enjoyed watching the episode of Marcus in Denmark and Richie in the restaurant. It allowed us to see a side to the characters that we hadn't really seen before. All of the cast absolutely smashed their roles. I would say that the only character that I wasn't really a big fan of was Claire. I just wasn't that convinced by the character and her chemistry with Carmen. I found it to be not as natural as I would have liked. I'm a huge fan of this season. The camera work is incredible with the single shot takes, rapid movements and zooms to exaggerate. The soundtrack is also so memorable too. So many scenes have tracks behind them which really do complement what we're watching. Plus it pulled on my heartstrings, which is also great. I hope this show comes back for more because it's one that I already want to see more of again. I almost wish that they released it weekly. That would have been nice as it could have lasted so much longer, but hey, I'm happy with what we got. So, there you have it, The Bear Season 2 Ending Explained. If you want to see more videos such as Endings Explained, theories and predictions and character breakdowns, then click on the I button, or alternatively you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. If you'd like to give me a show or movie that you'd like me to review, then head over to my Twitter, @BrainPilot_, and tweet me what show or movie you'd like me to review next. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of Season 2? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.